Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende, physically located in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, but serving our members and friends not only in Mexico, but all over the U.S., Canada, and beyond. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, the minister of the fellowship, and I have the privilege of leading this morning's service, and I'm glad you've decided to join us. The poet William Butler Yeats wrote, "The voyage of discovery lies not in seeking new vistas, but in having new eyes." This certainly is not a time to venture out seeking new vistas, but this time could be a time to develop new eyes. At any difficult time in our lives, any time when we're struggling, feel overwhelmed or trapped, our first reaction may be to turn away, to try desperately to avoid engaging with the struggle, to shut out what troubles us. But there is another option, and that is to try and see it differently, to see it with different eyes, if you will, and to discover that maybe, just maybe, within our darkest times, within the most difficult situations we face, there may be a profound blessing. A blessing for us personally, a blessing for us to share with the world. It's been my privilege to know a few people who have found real blessings in tough times, and whose lives, whose calling, whose interaction with the world were profoundly changed by that discovery. I will share some of their stories later in the service. But before we go to explore this topic, we need to renew ourselves and in ritual remind ourselves of the importance of this beloved community that we have created and recreate each time we gather. Each week when we come together, our separate light, that spirit of love that burns within each of us, comes together in a single flame. The flame is held in our chalice, our sacred vessel, and it bears witness to truth. It reminds us of our oneness, not just with other members of the fellowship, but beyond, with the greater community, with all people, with our planet, with the universe. It reminds us of both our calling to do justice and to care for each other as we do. It is a small flame that we will light, but it can pierce the darkness of hate, of bigotry, of violence, and shine forth as a beacon of peace, love, hope, and strength. It expresses our gratitude for life and all the blessings it bestows, even those that come in disguise. And it also expresses our hope and aspirations for ourselves, for each other, and for our world. And with that spark from all of you, I will now light our chalice. Please join in singing hymn 347, Gather the Spirit. The words will appear on your screen. To do so, you're going to see some words that come up in the middle of the hymn. And those words are for you to read, but when the voices come in, it'll take you right back to the singing. So hymn 347, Gather the Spirit.
This Good morning, and welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende, a great place to spend Sunday together. I'm Dan Newspiel, the president of your fellowship. Here you can bring your entire self, your full identity, your questioning mind, and your heart to share safely in fellowship, reflection, and great music. No matter where you're from or where you are right now, whether you celebrated religious traditions or not, you're welcome here. Now, a few announcements. Is this your first time joining us? If so, please contact Chris Chase at the email in your chat box to learn more about our fellowship. Are you interested in joining one of our Zoom discussion groups? You can read further details about them at the bottom of the order of service that you received by email. For more information about these groups, contact Diana Amaya at the email in the chat box. We welcome your feedback on this service. If you have any, please contact Kathy Canepa at the email in the chat box. Our Zoom breakout room discussions after the service are great places to reflect on this service and to meet old and new friends. If you want to participate, please just stay connected and you'll be randomly assigned to a breakout room immediately at the end of the postlude music. Please be sure to accept your room assignment on Zoom. If you're in a room with only 1 or 2 members, stay put a few more minutes and I'll reassign you to another group. The rooms will stay open at least 20 minutes. I'll post a question at the end of the service that was provided by Tom to kick off your discussion. After the breakout session ends, those interested may return to the larger group to continue chatting. Choosing this fellowship as your spiritual home is an important commitment. After carefully deciding if UUFSMA is right for you, we welcome you to become an official member by completing a membership form available at our website and making a financial commitment to the fellowship that reflects your financial means and spirit of generosity. There's more information at our website listed in the chat box. Now, a brief message from our COVID-19 task force, whose members are physicians, nurses, social workers, and care team members with many years of experience pertinent to this pandemic. Cases are still rising in San Miguel, so we should all remain vigilant. As far as we know, no fellowship members have contracted COVID-19 here, so your safe practices do make a difference. We've been learning more recently about the role of aerosol particles in transmitting this virus. Aerosols, when compared to droplets, are much smaller, travel farther, and linger longer in the air, especially in indoor, poorly ventilated areas. If you're standing to the side of an infected person with a poorly fitted mask or with no mask at all, you may be at higher risk of getting infected. So our tips for today are: avoid indoor, poorly ventilated areas whenever possible. Use a mask that fits snugly over your face. Consider also wearing goggles like this, or a face shield when you need to be indoors, especially with limited ventilation or for protracted periods. Some examples of places where I would wear goggles are for necessary dental visits and airplane trips. One more point. Some of you may have seen in last week's UUF newsletter an announcement of an in-person meeting of the philosophy group at Hotel Quinto Loreto. This posting was a mistake, since this event is not sponsored by UUF, and we are not sponsoring any in-person meetings or other events for the foreseeable future. So please continue to be safe, avoid indoor gatherings, and maintain at least 6 feet or 2 meter separation when interacting with anyone outside your immediate sheltering unit. Now, please join Kathy and I in reciting our spoken covenant, which should appear on your screen. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
We now enter into a very sacred time in our service, a time when the members of this fellowship share their significant joys, sorrows, and concerns that they are now experiencing. If you have a joy, sorrow, and concern that you would like me to share in an upcoming service, please email it to me. Also, if you have one that you've not submitted but would like to share today, you may type it into the chat column now. As we share our joy, sorrows, and concerns, we light a candle representing that that person, that thought, or that prayer is with us in this service. This first candle is for those among us who struggle with loneliness, particularly in this time of isolation. It's a reminder to you that we're together in spirit and here for you. Please reach out if you need us. Please participate in the many opportunities that this fellowship provides to come together via Zoom during the week. May this candle also be a reminder to the rest of us to send an email or make a call, better yet, to someone you know who is enduring loneliness at this time. And why not do it this week? Several of you, after the funeral of John Lewis this week, asked that we again light a candle, not just in his honor and memory, as we did last week, but one of recommitment to continue the good fight, to continue making good trouble, to advance real human equality. Along with several of you, I light this candle in memory of Gene Pickett, who was president of the UUA from 1979 to 1985 and passed away last week. Many of you knew him in his leadership capacity. He continued to serve our denomination in retirement. I knew Gene as one of the members of the panel that certified me as a candidate for our ministry. This is a candle of gratitude for his life and work that continues among us through the many ministers that he helped to create. And the next two are candles of wonderful joy. The first, Helen Rivas Rose, reminds us that today is Dory Beach's 92nd birthday. And it's so wonderful to light such a joyous candle, having in the past few weeks lit candles of concern as she went through some medical procedures. So happy birthday, Dory. And Diana Amaya reminds us that today is also Marlis Hines' birthday. So happy birthday to Marlis. Finally, we light a candle for the joys, sorrows, and concerns that you have typed into the chat column this morning, and for all those held deep in our hearts, but which remain unspoken. Our life is a song. May we sing together always. May our voice be soft. May our singing be music for others, and may it keep others aloft. Sing gently, always. Sing gently as one. May we stand together always. May our voice be strong. May we hear the singing, and may we always sing along. These beautiful words are from an anthem by Eric Whitacre, which will now guide us in meditation. This will be sung to us now by the most amazing choir ever assembled. 17,572 singers from 129 countries.
We strive to be loving to each other and the surrounding Mexican community. As we often remind ourselves, we donate at least half of our fellowship income to organizations that serve Greater San Miguel. One of the organizations we support with our grants is El Charco del Ingenio, whose mission is to preserve the natural and cultural heritage of San Miguel's Botanical Garden, which is dedicated to the conservation and study of regional flora and ecosystems through environmental education. Funding for this fellowship has allowed El Charco to pursue its goal of creating an interpretive center for enriching and expanding its commitment to helping youth and adults understand, appreciate, and protect the natural world. Due to the pandemic, El Charco has had to close its gates to the public, which has brought both challenges and surprises. Challenges include the loss of income associated with visitors while still maintaining the salaries of personnel and meeting the expenses of maintaining the grounds. But an unexpected benefit of the absence of visitors has been that the garden has experienced an abundance of wildlife not previously seen. Further, this hiatus in traffic into the garden has provided an opportunity for its stewards to rethink the model of uneven and predatory development that has governed San Miguel in recent years, in order to find more just and respectful paths for the community and nature. During the upcoming musical selection or immediately after the service, please go to our donate link, which you can find in the chat box or at our website, UUFSMA.org. That's UUFSMA.org. You may use PayPal or any credit or debit card to donate any amount. You may indicate in the notes section if you want your donation to go toward our minister's discretionary fund. Or you may leave it blank to help meet the expenses of Sunday services like this one, as well as supporting groups like El Charco. If you prefer to donate by check, please send me a private chat and I'll provide the correct address depending on your location. And thank you for your generosity.
Our reading for this morning is entitled Pearls of Wisdom. It's from My Grandfather's Blessing by Rachel Naomi Remen. An oyster is a soft, tender, and vulnerable thing. Without the sanctuary of its shell, it could not survive. But oysters must open their shells in order to breathe water. Sometimes while an oyster is breathing, a grain of sand will enter its shell and become a part of its life from then on. Such grains of sand cause pain, but an oyster does not alter its soft nature because of this. It does not become hard and leathery in order not to feel. It continues to entrust itself to the ocean, to open and breathe in order to live. But it does respond. Slowly and patiently, the oyster wraps the grain of sand in thin, translucent layers until over time it has created something of great value in the place where it was most vulnerable to its pain. A pearl might be thought of as an oyster's response to its suffering. Not every oyster can do this. Oysters that do are far more valuable to people than oysters that do not. Sand is a way of life for an oyster. If you are soft and tender and must live on the sandy floor of the ocean, making pearls becomes a necessity if you are to live well. Disappointment and loss are part of every life. Many times we can put such things behind us and get on with the rest of our lives. But not everything is amenable to this approach. Some things are too big, too deep to do this. And we'll have to leave important parts of ourselves behind if we treat them in this way. These are the places where wisdom begins to grow in us. It begins with suffering that we do not avoid or rationalize or put behind us. It starts with the realization that our loss, whatever it is, has become a part of us and has altered our lives so profoundly that we cannot go back to the way it was before. Something in us can transform such suffering into wisdom. The process of turning pain into wisdom often looks like a sorting process. First, experience everything. Then one by one, let things go, the anger, the blame, the sense of injustice, and finally even the pain itself, until all we have left is a deep sense of the value of life and a greater capacity to live it. There are many ways to tell a story, many mediums of expression, many metaphors to make a story memorable. Important stories find a home in all great traditions, or maybe better said, important messages expressed through different kinds of stories find their home in religious texts, great poetry and literature, in music and in visual arts. We see them even in these observations of the natural world like Rachel Naomi Remen shared. They get quoted and interpreted time and again, and new stories emerge with the same message. I think the teachings of these great stories apply universally. We see them play out in others and in ourselves. Great stories just ring true time and time again. If you by chance grew up in the Methodist tradition, as I know some of you did, or for that matter, most any Protestant tradition, you're familiar with the hymnody of John Wesley. What many consider to be his greatest hymn text, Come Thou, O Traveler Unknown, is a very detailed account of the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel found in the book of Genesis. And it's usually sung to a tune called St. Petersburg. For those of you who make that connection, just hearing this tune brings the story to you. Hear it now rung out from the bell tower of Grace Church in Branford, Ontario, Canada. My first trip to Paris was when I was in college, a time when, like many, I was finding out who I was. Perhaps you could say, struggling with my identity. I walked into the great church of Saint-Sulpice and started down the aisle on the right side. And on the wall of the very first side chapel, I saw a painting that jumped out at me, spoke powerfully to me. Ever since, every time I visit Paris, I make a pilgrimage to it. And the story it tells is one of great meaning to me, one that I have seen played out again and again. It is the biblical story of Jacob wrestling with the angel from the 32nd chapter of the book of Genesis. This painting is by Eugene Delacroix. From an artistic standpoint, it's noted for its incredibly beautiful depiction of nature and for its unusual placement of the two main figures, not in the center, but on the left side of the painting, perhaps suggesting that indeed something is out of balance here. Now, as we all view that painting, I would like to tell you the story. Jacob is on his way home. He's been away for a long time, and he's worried how his brother will receive him, accept him. You see, many years earlier, Jacob tricked his father into giving him what rightly belonged to his brother. He stole his brother's birthright, and he fled and has been gone for a long time. Living in a foreign land, he married, had a family, was successful, but was still bothered by his past. He's going home to face it. He's worried about how his brother will greet him. He's traveling with his family and his animals and his possessions. He comes to a river. Crossing it will mean that he's entered the land of his brother. He sends his family and animals along ahead. You can see them in the distant area off to the right of the painting. He sends them across the river. He's not ready to cross yet. He stays alone on the other side. It's nighttime. Perhaps he falls asleep. Suddenly he finds himself in a great struggle. He's wrestling with a stranger. Some call him an angel. It goes on all night, and Jacob is winning. The angel has seriously injured Jacob, dislocating his hip. I think you see that happening in the painting before you. But Jacob will not let go of the angel. The angel demands, "Let me go." But Jacob says, "Not until you bless me." Now, isn't that a strange thing to say? Wanting the person you're fighting with, who's hurt you, to bless you. The angel asks him, "What is your name?" And he replies, "My name is Jacob." But the angel says, "Not anymore. Your name is now going to be Israel," a name which can mean to have fought with God and won, or simply perhaps to have overcome the struggle. Jacob will likely limp the rest of his days. The struggle has left its mark for sure, but he can proceed across the river, on with his life, because he has found the blessing in his struggle. I invite you now to join in singing hymn number 128, "For All That Is Our Life." And to do so, we'll go to First Unitarian Church in Providence, Rhode Island, and we'll actually be singing it from our hymnal.
Good morning. I'm Fred Jodry. Aren't you excited that it's May? Today we're going to sing hymn 128, For All That Is Our Life. I'll give Arlen a moment to get back to the words so you can join in if you are feeling inspired to sing along. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build a common good and to make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its reward, for hours of rest and love, we come with thanks and praise. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, for we are called to use to build a common good and make our own days glad.
Did you pay attention to the words we just sang? We sang, we come with thanks and praise for all that is our life. Do we really mean that? Do we really mean those words that we sang in verse 3? For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass. We come with thanks and praise for all that is our life. It doesn't sound right that even though things we dread, the pain and the suffering we endure, can bless our lives. It's a tough concept to say we're grateful for even the struggles in our lives. But that's exactly what the story of Jacob and the angel and Naomi Remen's story about what that oyster does with a grain of sand are trying to teach us. I believe that these stories capture one of life's most important but most difficult lessons. The message is that if we seek them out, if we insist upon finding them, there are great blessings to be discovered, even in the struggles of our lives. And when we do embrace these blessings, they have the power to change us, to enrich our lives, to open new doors, to create something new and wonderful in our lives. Like the oyster, we can make something beautiful out of something that's given us pain and discomfort. Like Jacob, we demand the blessings of our struggles, we can be fundamentally changed, even into a new person. When we talk of blessings, we usually think of the good things that come into our lives. What I'm talking about today are the blessings that come disguised, that take some real work to see. What I propose to you today is that the suffering we may incur, the failures and the brokenness in our lives, even the great losses, can contain blessings. We, like those oysters, can form pearls from the inevitable painful encounters of life. And those pearls are something beautiful and valuable. Indeed, they're pearls of wisdom. I suspect there's not a person with us today who has not had some struggles in their lives. For many of us, there have been persistent struggles, perhaps with illness or impairments, with difficult relationships or with loss. Sometimes these struggles are the result of poor decisions we've made in our lives, like Jacob. But just as often, the struggles of our lives are the result of things over which we have no control, things that happen to us. We get cancer, we're in an accident, a loved one dies. Sometimes our struggles are simply the result of who we are. A gay or trans person rejected by their family or bullied in school. A person with a disability rejected because they can't do a certain thing. It really isn't that important if we've imposed the situation on ourselves or if life has dealt us a difficult hand. Far more important is what we do with these struggles in our lives. Back to that hymn for a moment. You'll recall that it reminded us that all life, all of it, is a gift that we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. We're called to use, it says, not just our obvious blessings and talents, but our struggles too, to build the common good and make our own times glad. But when we're in the midst of struggle, it sure doesn't feel like that there's potential for any kind of a blessing there. The potential to make us glad or lead us in ways that we contribute something to society just doesn't feel like it's there. No, when you have to face difficult times, we're far more likely to harbor anger towards others or towards God or towards ourselves. We can take the poor me attitude and sink into depression, self-loathing, or we can try to escape our adversity, trying to ignore it, or even using things like drugs and alcohol to avoid it. All these options ultimately cause us to be consumed and potentially destroyed by our adversity. But there is another option. It's the option described in the biblical story and in the reading about the oyster that I shared with you this morning. We can find a blessing in our struggles, and when we do, we too can be changed in positive and profound ways. It's not easy work, but there are blessings waiting to be discovered in our failings, in our suffering, in our adversity. Sometimes it's in our struggle that we find the calling to work for justice. Sometimes it's in our struggles that we find creativity. And surely it is in our personal suffering that we find greater depth of compassion and understanding for others. You know, it's been my privilege to witness some extraordinary examples of this happening. I selected just a few who have particularly moved me. The way these people have lived their lives is a sermon in itself, and I hope that sharing some of their stories speaks to you as they have to me. A few of you know that Malcolm and I had a third member of our family who lived with us for many years. He was Uncle T to us, Dr. Thomas Drischner, a renowned concert pianist to the world, and it was his finding the blessing in his personal struggle that made him that great pianist. He was from a little town on the Pennsylvania-West Virginia border. Growing up, he was not drawn to the things that typical country boys were, and instead he began to play the piano. After graduation from high school in 1929, he went to the University of West Virginia, where it was discovered by some of the students that he was gay. Of course, they didn't even use that word then. When he was in his 90s, still living with us, Uncle T would still recall how he was treated, and tears would still come to his eyes. You see, the news of he being gay had spread throughout the entire campus. He was taunted all the time, but worse, he was totally ostracized. No one would speak to him. They would even cross the street to avoid encounters with him. His piano professor refused to teach him, saying, "I'll give you a lesson when you learn to behave." It was a time of utter despair for him. His father got wind of it and even became violent with him. His mother, who had understood him and been his first piano teacher, had died. He didn't understand why he was different, but he knew he was. He took his struggle to the piano. He said to me so many times, in those days, the piano was the only friend I had. He practiced hour after hour, sometimes for the entire day. Well, finally, one member of the college administration at the University of West Virginia, an older single man who I suspect was probably gay himself, came to know the story of his struggle and said to him, "You can't stay here. You have to go to New York." This man talked to Uncle T's father and convinced him that this was the right move. He then took Uncle T to New York. He connected him with one of the great Russian piano teachers who took him on as a student. And it was only a few years later that he won the prestigious Naumburg Award. And when he played the winner's recital in New York City's renowned town hall, in the front row were his father and stepmother, and even some of those people who had treated him horribly. They were brought to New York to witness this event by that same college administrator who rescued him and had taken him there. You know, life is fickle. After Uncle T won the Naumburg Award, he became famous. He played concerts literally all over the world. His hometown and his college now sang his praises. They were proud of him. They even awarded him an honorary doctorate. The piano teacher who refused to teach him, well, now he claimed him as his prize student. But it was not the praise, but the rejection that he experienced that made him a great pianist, and you could hear it in his music. As I think about Uncle T, it leads me to realize just how much great music and art and poetry and literature comes out of places of great pain. You know, I think of a young Provincetown poet that I knew by the name of David. David was very ill, dying from AIDS. This was before there was any good medical treatment. And the sicker David got, the more profound and beautiful the poetry became. I remember him reading a poem and saying, "I could never have written this if I was not dying of AIDS. AIDS has given me a gift." I think back through the centuries to the music that Tchaikovsky wrote and the paintings of Van Gogh, created, I think, from their pain. Surely you can add to this list. Many have found creative talent in the pain, in the struggle, in the difficult times. Similarly, so too many have found their calling to do the work of love and compassion and justice in their own pain. Don't you think that was probably the case for that college administrator who took Uncle T to New York? You know, it was Thornton Wilder who once wrote, "In love service, only the wounded can serve." Think of all the great wounded people, the famous ones and the ones known only by a few, who have given from their place of pain. You know, in ministry, I saw it all the time. A parent who had lost a child brings a special gift to another parent when they face that kind of horrible tragedy. A person who had wrestled with cancer can minister to someone in treatment in ways others cannot. I'm not sure if I would go as far as to say that in love service only the wounded can serve, but surely the wounded serve in a deeper way than those who have not experienced the suffering. From my days as an assistant district attorney, I remember well a woman named Gert. She was one of the strongest women I ever met. And as hard as it is to believe, she had not one, but two children at different times killed by drunk drivers. Gert was kind of a gruff woman. I remember her saying, "Kid," not the usual way someone addressed the assistant district attorney, but I was still in my 20s. "Kid, don't let them tell you lightning doesn't strike the same place twice. It did for me." She was devastated by the loss of her children, as you would expect, but she found purpose in her pain. She founded the local MAD chapter, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and she came to court every day. Yes, every day. And she checked the list to see what drunk driving cases were scheduled. And she sat in that courtroom making sure no judge gave a slap on the wrist like it happened in the case where one of her children was the victim. She talked to defendants in the hallway and told them that what they did had killed her 2 children. Some judges even included in their sentence the requirement that the defendants spend an hour with Gert. She said to judges, "Be tough. I don't want other mothers to lose their kids." But that wasn't all she did. Gert was a fighter, but she also had compassion. She would take you from the courtroom to an AA meeting. She would hold other mothers, physically hold them, who lost a child to drunk driving and sit with them every minute of the trial. She would go to the legislature and testify for stronger laws. She changed the way drunk driving cases were handled in the court system. Of course, had she not suffered her losses, she never would have done any of this. And could we have any better example this week of one who drew purpose from struggle than the great John Lewis? His struggle with racism blessed him with a calling that changed a nation. Being the victim of violence wedded him to nonviolence. Being excluded and hated made him inclusive and loving, even of those who were against him. There is real power and purpose when you find the blessings in your struggle. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've always been drawn to the story of Jacob and the angel, probably because it helped me to find the blessings in my own struggles. My story of struggling to come to terms with being gay is certainly not as dramatic as Uncle T's. But I had those same feelings of why me and felt the need to compensate for who I was, just as he did. In high school and college, I certainly suffered from what's often called the best little boy in the world syndrome, meaning that you always have to do more or be better in order to compensate, to make up for being gay. I endured some public attacks, and I did not get a job or a position more than once because it was known that I was gay. You know, I had to lie on the bar exam application about who I was in order to even become a lawyer. And in my practice and in my ministry since, I have connected with and helped many gay people and lesbian people and trans folks. And every time I do, I feel that I'm giving something from my place of pain. I'm sure that my struggles were the result of my being gay, are the struggles that in fact led me both to being a lawyer and to being a minister. In closing, let me say that I wish for you all the things we usually consider blessings, but even more, the eyes to see the blessings hidden in the difficult times of your life. The only way we can live a healthy life is to let go of anger and resentment and the why me attitude, and not only accept and come to a place of peace with our struggles, but mind them. Mind them to find what they have to teach us, even to find in them the motivation and the inspiration to contribute to the world in a profoundly meaningful way. Our lives are made of many things. Thank goodness there are times of abundant joy and love. But we also experience the pain and tears of struggle. Together they make us who we are. I believe that we have the strength within us to live it all and to be better for it. I believe that what we're called to do is to live all our lives. Our lives flow on in endless song, and in spite of all the struggle and the strife and the tumult we may experience, sometimes it is the strife and the tumult that really make us the extraordinary person we can be. I invite you now to sing hymn number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. The words will appear on the screen in just a moment. Our words of benediction come also from Rachel Naomi Remen, the author of The Story of the Oyster. She writes, "Hidden in all stories is the one story. The more we listen, the clearer that story becomes. Our true identity, who we are, why we are here, what sustains us, is in this story." We now extinguish the flame, but not the light. That we carry with us is a guide for our week ahead. And may peace be with you till we meet again.